They tell outsiders it's just an old town superstition, a harmless little tradition. If the power ever goes out, and it will, more often than you'd think, you're supposed to light a candle in every single room of your house. Every window, every doorway. No dark corners, no unlit spaces. The moment the lights die, you light the flame. That's it. If you ask why, most folks will just smile and tell you it's for good luck. But people here don't joke about it. Not really. I've lived here my whole life, and I've never once missed a candle when the blackout comes. You don't gamble with it, you don't test it, and you never ask too many questions. Because if you leave one room dark, they notice. The thing is, our town doesn't get storms often. No hurricanes, no heavy snow. And yet, the outages happen anyway. Sometimes in the middle of a sunny day. Sometimes when you're sitting at dinner and the TV cuts to black without warning. No hum, no flicker, just gone. And when that happens, there's this silence that follows. It's not the absence of noise, it's something heavier, like the air itself is listening. We light the candles before they get too close, before the shadows start to shift in ways they shouldn't, before the shape at the window decides it's time to come inside. I haven't told anyone this before. Not my friends, not my family, not even the people in this town who've known me since I was a kid. Honestly, I don't know why I'm telling you now. Maybe it's because you seem like the kind of person who's seen strange things too. Or maybe I just need someone to listen, really listen without telling me I'm imagining it. But if I tell you, you have to promise me something. Promise you won't come here. Promise you won't try to. See it for yourself. Outsiders always think they're immune to the things we grow up fearing. You're not. The truth is, this isn't about some silly rural superstition. It's about survival. You see, when I was younger, I thought the candle rule was just another one of those small-town quirks, like how every summer we cover our mirrors for a week, or how the post office closes early every third Thursday for something they only ever call the count. Little things you grow up with and never question. But the candle thing, it's different. I live in a cabin on the edge of town. It's not much. One bedroom, a small kitchen, a living room with a couch that's older than I am. The woods wrap around three sides of the property, so close you can hear the branches scratching against the siding when the wind picks up. Out here, we don't have much cell signal. Sometimes none at all. If the power goes, you're cut off. Just you, the dark, and whatever else decides to come by. The first time I ever saw one of them was in my early 20s. Power went out just after sunset. I did what I was taught, lit candles in the windows, on the counters, in the hallway. I had just finished placing one in the bedroom when I saw movement outside. At first, I thought it was just a neighbor checking in, but then I realized my nearest neighbor is a 15-minute drive away, and this figure was standing right at the tree line, half in shadow, watching. I can't explain how I knew it wasn't human, but I did. Something about the way it held still, like it wasn't breathing. And the darkness around. It didn't look like night. It looked thicker, heavier, as if it was swallowing the trees behind it. I stepped closer to the window, candlelight flickering against the glass. That's when it moved. Not toward me, not away, just sideways. A slow, deliberate glide, as if it were circling the cabin without lifting its feet. I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to pull the curtains shut, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, my hands cold, my ears ringing. Then, and I swear to you, the candle nearest the door went out. No draft, no sound, just gone. I scrambled for the lighter, heart pounding, and relit it with shaking hands. I remember thinking, don't let it get dark, not even for a second. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. They can't cross the light. I didn't sleep that night. It was only later, talking to Mrs. Hendricks from down the road, that I learned what happens if you don't follow the rule. She told me about a man years ago, before I was born, who laughed off the candle thing. said it was old wives' nonsense. The power went out one summer night. He didn't light a single flame. By morning, the sheriff found his cabin door wide open. No sign of a break-in. Coffee still warm on the counter, but the man gone. And the strange thing was, all the clocks in his house had stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m. I know how this sounds. I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't seen them. If I hadn't felt that cold ripple in the air when the darkness presses too close to the windows. But I have, more than once. And it's getting worse. In the last year, the outages have been happening more often. Not during storms anymore. Sometimes on perfectly calm nights. Sometimes in the middle of the day, when the sun's high and the sky's clear. And every time, they come. You might be wondering why I don't just leave. Believe me, I've thought about it. But moving away isn't as simple as packing a bag. People who try, they don't always make it far. It's like the dark follows them, or maybe it's already inside them by then. I'm telling you all this because I can feel it getting closer. I don't just mean my cabin, I mean me. The candles work, but I swear the shadows are learning. Sometimes I'll see them hesitate at the edge of the light, like they're figuring out how to reach through it. And last week one of them smiled at me. I don't know how much time I have before they figure it out completely, before the light stops working, but I need someone to remember this, to know the rules. If the power ever goes out where you are, anywhere, not just here, light a candle in every room, every doorway, every window. Because once they find their way inside, there's no getting them out. Promise me you won't forget that. The cabin I live in isn't new. It's not some cozy modern Airbnb with polished wood and bright, clean lines. This place was built by my grandfather's hands, before I was born, before my mother was even old enough to walk. It's a squat, uneven thing 2 steps down from the porch to the dirt, wood that's weathered into a permanent gray. And a roof line that sags ever so slightly to the left, as if the trees are pulling it toward them. It's surrounded on 3 sides by dense forest, oak, maple, and pine that tangle together so thickly you can't see more than 10 or 15 feet into the shadows. The 4th side faces the dirt road into town, though road is generous. It's more of a rutted track, hard packed by decades of tires. The grass growing high between the wheel marks. From the outside, the cabin looks small. Step inside, and it's even smaller. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room that blends into the kitchen without so much as a counter to divide them. It smells like cedar and dust. No matter how much you sweep, there's always a fine layer of grit collecting in the corners, as though the woods themselves are seeping inside. Every window has heavy curtains, not for warmth, but to keep things out. My grandmother insisted on that. She said glass wasn't enough of a barrier when they got curious. On still nights, when the power's on and the air's quiet, you can almost pretend this is a peaceful place. But then something happens to remind you where you are. Sometimes, all at once, the birds stop singing. It's not a gradual quiet, the way dusk can bring it on in the city. No, it's like someone has pressed mute on the world. You don't realize how much background life there is until it's gone. That's usually when I notice the air, heavier, cooler, carrying that strange metallic temps you taste just before lightning strikes. Except here, there's no lightning, no storm, and sometimes, the clocks stop. I've got 3 of them. 1 in the living room, 1 on the bedside table, and 1 in the kitchen, above the stove. They don't run on the same batteries. They're not plugged into the same power, but every now and then, they'll all freeze at the same time. Not dead, just stopped. Always within a few minutes of each other. And no matter how often I reset them, they're never quite right again. The town itself is small, less than 500 people. Most of them living along the main street where the diner, post office, and hardware store sit shoulder to shoulder like teeth in an old jaw. There's a small library that smells of mildew and yellowed paper, and a church with a bell that hasn't rung in decades. Folks here tend to keep to themselves, not out of rudeness, but because too much attention invites questions, and questions invite curiosity. The candle rule isn't the only tradition. On certain nights in late October, the whole town shuts down by sundown. No one explains why, and no one new sticks around long enough to figure it out. People who move here from the outside either leave within a year or start following the same rules as everyone else. There are rumors, of course. You hear them whispered in the diner over coffee, traded in low voices when a stranger walks in. One of the oldest is about the Blackout winter, a stretch of 2 weeks, back before the dam was built, when the power stayed out for 14 nights straight. No one will tell me exactly how many people went missing during that time, but I know enough to guess it wasn't a small number. Another rumor says there's a place deep in the woods where the ground is soft, too soft, and if you step there, you'll hear knocking from beneath your feet. And then there's the thing about reflections. See, most folks here keep their mirrors covered unless they're using them. Not for vanity or tradition, but because sometimes, just sometimes, the reflection isn't quite right. You'll see yourself standing there, still as you are, but your eyes will be just a fraction late to follow your movements, or your mouth will curve into a smile you didn't make. When I was a kid, I laughed at that one, until one night, brushing my teeth during a storm, the lights flickered, and in the half-second of darkness, I saw myself still standing in the mirror, head tilted, smiling. While I was bent over the sink, I've never left my mirrors uncovered since. I think that's why the cabin feels the way it does, like it's holding its breath. It's built on land my family's owned for generations, but even we never built farther into the trees. Grandfather always said the woods here aren't empty, that there's more living in them than we can see, and I believe him. The strange part is, during the day, you can almost forget. You can chop wood, fix the roof, drink coffee on the porch. The woods look normal enough, the sunlight filtering through the branches in dappled patches. But when night falls, when the first star appears and the air cools, the forest changes. Shadows stretch longer than they should. The spaces between the trees look deeper. That's why the candle rule makes sense, in its own way. It's not about light you can see by. It's about making sure there's nowhere for the dark to pull. Because the dark here isn't just the absence of light. It's something else. Something with weight and shape. Something that presses against the glass like it's waiting for permission to come inside. And lately, I think it's been getting bolder. 2 weeks ago, just after midnight, I woke to find the candle in my bedroom flickering wildly. There was no draft, no window open. The wax had burned down low, but it hadn't gone out yet. And in the unsteady light, I saw movement in the corner, not a shape, exactly, but a thicker patch of dark that seemed to be leaning toward me. By the time I sat up, it was gone. That morning, all 3 of my clocks were frozen at 3:03 a.m. The first real sign that things were changing came 3 nights after the corner shadow incident. I'd gone to bed late, reading by candlelight in the living room because the power had been out since sunset. The outage wasn't unusual, not anymore, but this one felt different. The air had been heavy all day, the kind of heaviness that makes your ears pop if you move too quickly, and every now and then, I thought I heard a faint tapping, like fingernails brushing against the siding. By the time I blew out the candle in the living room and moved to the bedroom, I was already uneasy. I lit the bedroom candle, checked the windows, and closed the door behind me. That's when the knocking started. It wasn't on the front door, or even the walls. It was coming from the floor. 3 slow, deliberate thuds, then silence. I held, still listening. After a minute, they came again. 3 knocks, not random, not hurried, measured. I told myself it was just the wood settling. But wood doesn't settle in patterns. When I woke the next morning, the bedroom door was standing wide open. I always lock it from the inside during an outage, a habit drilled into me since childhood. but the lock was still turned. It had opened without unlocking. The next time the power went, the knocks didn't come from the floor. They came from the hallway, soft, almost polite. I tried to ignore them, reading to distract myself, but then something shifted in the corner of my eye. The chair in the living room, my grandfather's old armchair, was angled toward the hallway. I don't remember turning it that way. I moved it back, but the next morning, it was facing the hallway again. That same week, the dreams started. At first, they were strange, but harmless. Wandering the woods, hearing voices calling my name from far away. But then, they changed. I'd dream of someone, whispering right beside me, words I couldn't understand. When I woke, the candle would be nearly out, wax spilling over the holder like something had been breathing on it. One night, I heard the whisper clearly, a single word, closer. The worst part, when I got up that morning, there was a smear of ash on my pillow. I started sleeping less, or trying to. I'd sit in the living room with every candle lit, listening. Sometimes hours would pass with nothing, and then, without warning, something would knock a sharp, echoing rap that seemed to come from inside the walls. The air would change when it happened. The warmth from the candles would thin, replaced by a damp chill that raised goosebumps on my arms. And always, the silence outside would deepen until I felt like the whole world had stopped moving. One night, I caught myself staring at the window for so long that my eyes began to water. I didn't even notice the figure at first. It was faint, just beyond the glow, a shape darker than the night around it, taller than a man, too narrow to be a tree. It didn't move, didn't blink, didn't do anything except watch. I backed away from the glass, heart hammering, and then the candle nearest the window went out. I lit it again, and again, and again. Each time, it sputtered and died within seconds. The shadows outside seemed to press closer, until I finally gave up and left the window dark, my skin crawling, with the knowledge that something was standing there in the pitch black, just beyond the pane. After that, I started hearing movement inside the cabin. Not footsteps, exactly, more like the soft scuff of fabric against wood, as though someone were brushing past the furniture. A few times I swore I saw the hallway stretch longer than it should, as if the dark at the far end was pulling it out like taffy. And then the voices returned. This time, they weren't in dreams. I'd be sitting in the kitchen, candlelight pooling in little circles on the table, when I'd hear faint murmurs from the bedroom. I'd go in, find nothing. The moment I stepped out, the murmurs would start. Again, this time from the living room. It was like they were leading me somewhere, or maybe just playing with me. One outage, about 2 weeks ago, something new happened. I was dozing in the chair, couldn't bring myself to lie down, when I woke to the sound of breathing, not my own, slow, deep, deliberate. It was coming from behind the couch. I sat perfectly still, trying not to let the candlelight flicker too much. The breathing continued, steady, patient. Then it stopped, and the couch shifted, just slightly, like something had pressed its weight into the back of it. I didn't move until sunrise. That same day, I noticed the clocks again. All three had stopped, this time at 3:33 a.m., not frozen seconds apart, exactly the same. I don't know if it's the time that matters, or just the fact they can do it at all. Lately, the outages have been happening even when the sky is bright and cloudless. The last one started in the middle of the afternoon. I lit the candles anyway. You don't wait for night. Not if you've lived here long enough. Around dusk, I heard a sound I'd never heard before. It wasn't knocking. It wasn't whispering. It was laughter, low, distorted, curling through the hallways like smoke. The kind of laugh that isn't meant to be funny. I followed it, even though every instinct screamed not to. It led me to the bathroom. The mirror was uncovered. I hadn't uncovered it, and in the reflection, the bathroom behind me was empty. I turned, heart in my throat. The real bathroom was not empty. Something stood in the corner. It was shaped like a person, but its edges were all wrong, too sharp in some places, too soft in others. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and though the candlelight should have touched it, the thing remained entirely in shadow. I blinked, and it was gone. The outages keep coming. The knocking's louder now, the whispers clearer. Sometimes they say my name. Sometimes they tell me things I wish I hadn't heard. And last night, the bedroom door opened on its own again. This time, I was watching it. The lock never moved. The revelation didn't come all at once. It came in pieces, scraps of knowledge, each one making me wish I'd never found it. It started when I decided to finally search the cabin properly. I'd been living here for years, and in all that time, I'd never gone beyond surface cleaning. The place had always felt closed off, like it didn't want me poking around in certain corners. But after the mirror incident, after the breathing, after the voices said my name, I couldn't take it anymore. The first place I checked was the bedroom floor. The boards there were old, warped from humidity, and one near the far wall had a faint outline that didn't quite match the rest. I pried at it with a flathead screwdriver, and after a few minutes, it came loose with a sharp groan of wood. Underneath was a shallow compartment, no deeper than my hand, lined with brittle paper that had yellowed into something close to brown. On top of that paper was a book, a journal, bound in cracked leather that flaked under my touch. The writing inside was cramped, almost clawed into the page. The ink faded, but still legible. At first, the entries seemed normal enough, dated from decades ago, talking about weather, broken tools, harvests. But as the weeks passed and the handwriting, the tone changed. The writer started talking about them. They are drawn to absence. One entry read, absence of sound, absence of light, absence of company. Another, the candles hold them, but only if the flame is strong. They press at the edges of the glass when it dims. The later entries were barely coherent, scratched into the page, as if the writer had been trembling. Do not let them see your reflection. They take the shape of the living, but the eyes watch. The eyes. If the light dies, they are already inside. The last page was just one sentence, written over and over until the ink bled through. It remembers names. I should have stopped there, should have closed the journal and put it back. But I kept reading, my pulse pounding with each page, until something odd caught my eye, a stain at the very bottom of the compartment. The journal had been resting on it. When I moved it aside, I saw words carved into the wood beneath. Not written, carved, deep enough to splinter the surface, burn the room. That was when the air in the cabin shifted. It was the same heavy stillness I'd felt before, but this time it carried a sound with it, a slow, deliberate creak, like weight shifting on the floorboards in the living room. I closed the compartment and stood, listening. The creak came again, then another. Footsteps, heading toward the bedroom door. I held my breath. The knob turned once, then stopped, and then, from the other side of the door, a voice spoke. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. I know your name. I don't remember crossing the room, but suddenly I was at the door, my hand on the lock, my face pressed to the cold wood. My heartbeat was so loud I almost didn't hear the next sound, a faint scrape, like nails dragging downward. When it stopped, I knew that if I opened the door, I'd see something that wore my face. I backed away, sat on the bed, shaking, staring at the flicker of the candle on the nightstand. And that's when I noticed the shadows. There were more of them than there should have been. Not moving, not swaying with the candlelight, just standing. One of them leaned forward, and in that tiny movement, I understood what the journal meant. They weren't in the shadows. They were the shadows, and they'd been here a long, long time. The journal didn't say what they wanted, only that they took pieces of you, little by little, sometimes all at once. The more you saw them, the more they knew you, and once they knew you, they never stopped. I sat there until morning, the candle trembling on its last inch of wax. The shadows still clustered at the edges of the room. I didn't move until sunlight came, and even then, I swear they lingered, reluctant to leave. That was when I realized something else. The journal, it wasn't written by a stranger. It was my grandfather's handwriting. The morning after I found my grandfather's journal, I decided to leave. I told myself I'd only pack what I could carry. Nothing that had been in the cabin too long. No mirrors, no photographs, no furniture. Just clothes, food, a flashlight, and as many candles as I could shove into my bag. I didn't wait for the next outage. The sun was high when I locked the cabin door behind me. But even then, the trees seemed closer than they'd been before. Their trunks leaned in subtly, their branches bending low enough that the sky was a narrow strip above me. I told myself it was just my imagination. It wasn't. The trail that led into town was gone. I don't mean overgrown, I mean gone. Number, footprints, no tire tracks, no clearing in the brush. Just trees, endless in every direction. I chose a direction at random and walked. Hours passed. The light didn't change. My watch said the sun should have been sinking, but the sky stayed the same flat, pale color, and my shadow never lengthened. I thought I heard water at one point, rushing nearby, but when I pushed through the undergrowth toward the sound, I came out exactly where I'd started, right in front of the cabin. The lock was undone, inside. Every candle I'd left was lit, wax pooling thickly down their sides, flames standing unnaturally still, not a single flicker of draft, and on the kitchen table sat the journal, open to a blank page. I backed toward the door, and then froze. There was something written there now, the ink wet and black. For words. Put them in here. I didn't know what them meant, or maybe I did, and that was the problem. I ran. I didn't think. I just moved, shoving through trees, tripping on roots, branches clawing my face. I didn't care about direction anymore. I just needed to be somewhere else. But the forest didn't work like that. Every time I stopped to catch my breath, I'd hear it. A faint, polite knocking. Sometimes from the trees. Sometimes from the ground beneath me. Sometimes from inside my bag. Once, I pulled the bag open, desperate to prove there was nothing there, and all I saw were candles. But their wicks were already smoking, as if they'd just been blown out by nightfall. If you could call it night, I was back at the cabin again. The door was open this time. The candles still burned, and something stood just beyond the threshold. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel it smiling. "Stay," it said, my own voice. I don't remember walking inside, but I do remember sitting down at the kitchen table, pen in hand, the journal open in front of me. I remember starting to write. Not words, I thought, but words that came through me. Descriptions of places I'd never been, names I'd never heard, dates I didn't recognize. And as I wrote, the knocking stopped, the whispering stopped, the air grew warm again. It was quiet. That should have been a relief. But when I finally looked up from the page, I realized the candles were almost gone. Every single one. Their flames trembled low, their light shrinking, and in the dimming glow, the shadows moved closer. I understood then what my grandfather had been doing, why the journal was nearly full, why he'd carved burn the room into the floor. The candles aren't just to keep them out, they're to keep me in. The light isn't a shield, it's a tether, and when it dies, so do the parts of me that still belong to me. I could leave again, I suppose. Step outside and let the forest take me. Maybe find the real road, maybe not. But even if I did, even if I made it into town, I think they'd still be there, watching from the dark corners, smiling when the power flickers. So I write. I light the candles. I keep the shadows at the edges of the room, knowing one day I'll run out of wax, and when I do, well, maybe I'll step outside, or maybe I'll just blow them out myself. I haven't been able to sleep since that night, not in any real way. I might close my eyes for an hour or two, drift off into that shallow, half-conscious state where you're not quite dreaming and not quite awake. But it never lasts, because eventually, I hear it. That soft, deliberate knocking. 3 times. Always 3. Sometimes it comes from the walls. Sometimes from the floor. Sometimes, and these are the worst nights, from the back of my skull. Like the sound is happening inside me. I tell myself it's nothing, that it's the wind, the house settling, the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in my head. But deep down, I know better. I know what it really means. The candles burn almost constantly now. I've gotten used to the smell of wax and smoke, to the way the air feels heavy with heat. I even sleep with them on, though I don't think you could call it sleeping anymore. It's more like waiting. I've tried moving twice, in fact. Once to a cramped apartment above a laundromat in the next town, and once to a rental house by the highway. Both times, the same thing happened. The power went out. The knocking started. And when I lit the candles, I found the journal sitting somewhere it shouldn't have been open to a fresh, blank page. It follows. I think maybe it doesn't care about the cabin, or the forest, or the town. Those are just places it waits. What it really cares about is names. My name, my grandfather's, and now, since I'm telling you this, maybe yours too. You seem like someone who's seen strange things before. Someone who doesn't flinch at the thought of the dark. That's the only reason I'm still talking. Maybe if I give some of this to you, it won't feel so heavy in my own head. Maybe you'll carry a little of it for me. But if you do, if you've listened this far, you need to hear me clearly. If you ever find yourself in our town during an outage, and you see people placing candles in every window, don't ask why. Don't try to watch from outside. And for God's sake, don't let the flames go out. If you're somewhere else, somewhere far from here, and the power flickers, and you hear that knocking, don't answer it. Don't speak. Don't even move. Just light something. A candle, a lantern, anything that gives a steady, living flame. And if you don't have one, pray. Sometimes I think I'm holding it off. Other times, I think I'm just helping it pass the time until it decides to take me. I don't know which thought is worse, but I do know this. If you ever find a journal, hidden away in some forgotten place, with entries that sound like they're talking about you, stop reading. Don't finish the last page. Don't write your name inside, because once it knows you, you can't unknow it. If you ever find that place, burn it. Don't stay. Don't look for answers. Don't try to be the one who finally solves it. That's not how this works. It doesn't get solved. It just moves on to the next name, and now, it knows yours. Before I stop talking, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. Have you ever been somewhere dark and heard a sound that didn't belong? Not a creak, not a drip of water, but something deliberate, like it was waiting for you to notice it. Maybe it was footsteps in a hallway you knew was empty. Maybe it was knocking, soft and patient, just on the other side of the wall. If you have, I want you to tell me, not because I can fix it for you, I can't, but because I need to know I'm not the only one carrying this. Write it down in the comments, every detail you can remember. I'll read them all, just don't do it alone. Light a candle before you start typing. Keep it burning until you're done. Blow it out only if you're sure the room is empty. And if you've never heard anything like that, then I want you to remember this conversation for the rest of your life. Remember it the next time your lights flicker. Remember it when the power cuts out and your phone battery is low. Remember it when you feel that moment of hesitation, that tiny pause where you're not sure if you're really alone. That's when you'll know. That's when you'll light a candle. Not because you're scared of the dark, but because you're scared of what moves inside it now. Go on, tell me your story. Or keep your silence, if you think that will keep you safe. Just don't listen to the next story alone.